as part of that and think about our role in preserving the earth. So we're joined today with Ruby Radwan, who alongside her husband set up Willowbrook Farm in 2002, is that right?
I think so.
2002, and it was the first halal organic farm in the UK. They've done incredible work. And so she's also currently a holistic therapist, and so her expertise in nourishing the body and mind in tandem with nurturing the natural world is incredibly central to what we've been talking about in Muslim Week this year. So Ruby, if you'll take it away.
Okay, so assalamu alaikum. Thank you for inviting me. I can see you all sitting there ever so quietly and obediently. I'm not going to give you a long lecture, I hope. It'll be a short lecture. So what I would really like is if you would interrupt me if you had a question. You don't have to wait to the very end. So let's make this a little bit more informal. This is for you, this isn't a lecture. You've invited me, so I hope you benefit from that as much as you need to benefit today. So I'm going to start quite formally because I've been asked, it's a big ask for me because there's a lot to say and I talk a lot. So the big ask is for me to talk less. A bit like less is more, so the less I say, maybe a bit more out of it. Stewards of the Earth is quite a big deal, and like you said, I'm going to be focusing hopefully on emotional well-being and our connectedness to nature. I think it'll be, as I say, connected to nature and our emotional well-being, but I am going to go through the long way around, which for me is starting at the beginning. So the natural start for me is going to be Stewards and Ikhlas. So I won't read the Arabic in all the quotes that I do, but for this one I will. So, A'udhu min ash-shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. And we're often told that encompasses the whole Quran. That surah is so significant. So in the Arabic, the translation is, say he is God the One, the Eternal. He was not born and he does not give birth. There is nothing that is comparable to God. So this tells us that it's impossible to imagine God. God can't be defined or represented in any way, and there is nothing that we can compare to God. We're further told in Surah Al-An'am that no vision can grasp him. So that leaves us in a bit of a difficult situation. We believe in God, but we actually have no idea, what God is. And if we try, we're wrong. We can't imagine it. So everything that our limited faculties can imagine is God cannot be the truth. It can't be Al-Haq, which is the name of God, the truth. It cannot be that. But nothing can be compared to him. So how can we understand God? How can we draw close to God? And in fact, we don't actually need to use our imagination. We simply need to look around. Just look around us and use our inner faculties of knowledge to see his creation. The Quran directs us to see God in creation itself. In Surah Ghasiyah, the translation is, then do they not look at the camels, how they are created, and at the sky, how it is raised, and at the mountains, how they are erected, and at the earth, how it is spread out. Throughout the Quran, the natural world is mentioned as examples of God's miracles, ayats, examples of God. And often you'll find that these examples are simply about creation, about the natural world. So sky is mentioned so many times. Camels are mentioned quite a lot. Night and day, bees, rain, mountains, plants, seeds, all in order for us to see, contemplate, understand, learn through these signs that are signs of God. Through these signs, we can begin to know God by seeing the unity of the common origin of His creation in its multiplicity. The Quran says, "Do not those who reject faith see that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation before we exploded them into existence?" We're all familiar with that image, aren't we? We see it all the time on TV. "And we made all living things of water." Those of you who are studying not just biology but many things, this is sort of common knowledge now for us. The idea of wahdat al-wujud, which means the oneness of all existence, highlights the fact that all of creation is linked. We see this in the physical reality around us. For example, we're all connected through our genes, our DNA. We're often doing tests to find what little bit of us is Roman, what bit of us is Indonesian, what bit of us is Greek. We're also connected in communities, in cultures, in groups, in friends, as students, as women and men. There's so many connections that we have. We're all communities who all come together as one. We're connected to the whole of the natural world and the carbon-based life forms around us, so the animals and the plants as well, as we came from one unit that was exploded into existence. One way of understanding how God is one, but we see Him through the multiplicity of creation, is as a pure, single, white light. This is a metaphor used by Ibn Arabi, so I've just stolen from him, I can't credit it for myself. So we see God, or we imagine God, as a pure, single, white light shining through a prism. We see all the different colours of the spectrum, but the origin of the different colours that we perceive is one pure light, and none of the colours can exist without this one light. The pure light is contained in all the different colours. So all of existence reflects the one, the Creator, Al-Haq, the truth. But as humankind, we have a special status in creation. And again, the Quran tells us that. In Surah Al-Anam, which is the one you sent to me to focus this talk on, it says, "It is He who hath made you stewards of the earth. He hath raised you in ranks, some above others, that He may try you in the gifts He hath given you. For thy Lord is quick in punishment, yet He is indeed oft forgiving, most merciful." The word used here is khilafah, and it's not simply in the context of being rulers of countries, as we often hear, the khalifa of this and the khalifa of that, but a far wider, more significant concept of the stewardship of a natural environment that we inhabit. And to help us in this task, the Quran reminds us that we are given two things: the mizan means the balance, the natural balance, the order of things, and the furqan, which is the criterion, often seen as the Quran, an example of the Prophet, but also seen as our natural fitra, the condition that we actually are, our true nature that's given to us by God. So something deep inside, you might say common sense, or our soul really knows the truth, our innate ability to make good choices. So we have the mizan and the furqan, the balance and the criterion to help us discharge our role as stewards on the planet. In Surah Ar-Rahman, it starts off, well, it doesn't start off, but near the beginning, the Quran says, "He has raised up the sky, He has set the balance so that you may not exceed in the balance. So establish the balance with justice and fall not short in the balance. That's just 3 or 4 ayahs, and the number of times the mizan is the word that's used, the balance is mentioned. It is so important. In Surah Al-Imran, it says, He hath revealed unto thee, Muhammad, the scripture with truth, confirming that which was revealed before it, even as he revealed the Torah and the Gospel aforetime for a guidance to mankind, and hath revealed the criterion of right and wrong. So we're given the criterion of right and wrong and innate ability, and we're given the criterion that the Prophet Muhammad brought and the other prophets brought as a Torah and the Gospel. So we're not neglected. You know, God hasn't forgotten us. So this highlights our inner sense of discernment, what's right and wrong. That's the criterion. In Surah Anfal it says, O you who believe, if you keep your duty to Allah, He will give you discrimination, again, discrimination between right and wrong, and will rid you of your evil thoughts and deeds, and will forgive you. Allah is of infinite bounty. And I think that's really interesting, because it accepts that we have evil thoughts. He will rid you of your evil thoughts and deeds, that we do bad things, that we make mistakes. We do go off on one. But the important thing is that we're forgiven. That there is always infinite bounty. We can't imagine infinite bounty. And we can't imagine bounty. But that's what God is, infinite bounty. So we must keep the balance and follow the criterion. There is a surah called the Criterion, Surah Al-Furqan, and I'm going to just list a few things that it says in there. I didn't know how much it said in it until I just looked it up for this talk. So it mentions night as a garment for sleep, again, the physical, natural environment. The day as a resurrection. The wind as a blessing. Rain, pure water from the sky, as it revives the land and gives drink to all living things. Just imagine what happens when the tap isn't working in your kitchen and you can't drink water. How does that feel? Have you ever experienced not having water? We have. When it freezes, we don't have water. The animals don't have water. It tells of the 2 waters, sweet river and salty sea. The importance of kinship. The light of the sun and the moon, the significance. It reminds us to be grateful for the gifts mentioned so many times before, to be modest, to be humble, to address the ignorant with peace, to not be extravagant and wasteful, but also not stingy and niggardly, but to be moderate, again, balance, to not commit adultery, to not lie, to not be false. We're talking about balance and social environments as well, not just to create the natural world, but the social world, to maintain dignity and avoid frivolity, to not be deaf and blind when told of God's signs, and to be a good example to our partners and to our children. So that's the criterion. For Khan means criterion. That's a criterion. It's about balance, fundamentally, about taking care of the natural world and taking care of the social world. So I wanted to really get all that across, and I probably did it quite quickly, to really hammer home to us how important it is to be stewards, and how we're not sort of lost out in the sea. We're actually given the criteria, we're given focus on how to do that. Any questions so far? That's from my voice, is it? Yeah.
When you first mentioned the balance, there was an ayah before that, and that you said in English. Would you be able to repeat that one, please?
In English?
You read it off the, yeah. So the first time you mentioned mizan, the previous line was really interesting to understand. When you first introduced it. I'm sorry.
So when I first mentioned Mizan, natural balance, I mentioned Surah Rahman, where it mentions balance about 3 times. That or before it? That was Surah Ar-Rahman. And I've got the ayah's numbers if anyone wants it, we're going to have a look. It says, He raised up the sky, He set the balance, so that you may not exceed the balance. So establish the balance with justice, and fall not short in the balance. Right, so I'm going to waffle a bit now because I'm going to talk about myself. So on the farm that we live, it's we're very connected to nature. But taking this quite seriously, the direction given, the principles established, the fundamentals about creation and stewardship, means that it's easier for someone like me who lives in the natural environment to feel so connected. I can imagine it's not so easy for people studying at college where you're studying and writing essays all the time. But the Quran does talk about the gifts and how they are ranked. So different people are given different gifts. So it's not really about what you can and can't do because we don't all have farms, but what you can and cannot do in the environment that you live. So there's many things you can do, and it's really just thinking about it, contemplating and reflecting what can be done. And the important thing what I want to say really is when you start to connect with the environment, you start to feel emotionally and physically healthy. You know, the mind and body's connected. So we have emotional health, you have better physical health. When you have good physical health, that will affect your emotional health. So working outdoors brings us closer to both physical and emotional benefits, as well as protecting and taking care of animals and the land. So it's a really good connection with the whole idea of the natural creation. The Quran talks about night and day. In the built-up environment where we have electric lights and we're going in and out of restaurants at any time and we're in and out of cars, we forget about night and day and its significance. On the farm, it's very difficult to forget about the effects of darkness, because when I go out, there are no electric lights, there are no street lights. So I have to work in the dark, which means you can't work when it's dark because you can't connect, you can't see, and you can't see anything to work unless you've got your phone with the light on. And that's really interesting because that dictates to you how much you work and when you have to stop. So it puts you back into this concept of balance and nizam. When I go out and the moon is shining, I will use the light of the moon often to walk around the farm, and I start to appreciate another gift, the moon. I'd heard of Moon Shadow in Cat Stevens' song Moon Shadow, I don't know if any of you listened to it, it's a great song, and I remember was thinking, I wonder what that's about, until I walked around in the farm and I saw this massive shadow at night, and I just thought, this is strange, and this beautiful full moon behind me casting a moon shadow. And it's a very beautiful sight if you ever get a chance to be in real darkness. And you don't have to have a full moon, just a small amount of light from a partial moon, and you notice moon shadow, and it really is quite awesome. Noticing the waxing and the waning of the moon. I know we all do it in Ramadan because we're waiting, and when Ramadan's going to finish and we can start, celebrating and preparing for Eid. But actually it happens every month. So it's something, again, when you have electric lights, you don't notice these things, you don't notice the gifts, you don't notice the balance, how things move. Who likes to go out and it's pouring down with rain? Yeah. Anyone else? What's
Well, not
the UK, but not in the UK, but back home where I come from, I enjoy the rain.
Yeah. What's so good about going out in the rain?
It's cleansing.
Sorry?
It's cleansing. It's like a purification of lives.
It is, and the front it's like pure water from the sky.
I think if it's not windy and cold, it's quite pleasant. Even if it's chucking it down, to actually quite
Yeah.
enjoy it. Everything was so different.
What do you like about the rain?
I like being inside, but it's quite, I like hearing it, but I don't like it.
I like going out because I feel so much more accomplished when I'm back in. Like, oh, I've really gone out now.
So you appreciate the gift of not rain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sort of when you come back in, you get to be warm again. It's,
Yeah.
I know it's a nice shift.
Yeah, and that's, Allah mentions the rain in the Quran. And we are grateful for the rain and for the wind. It's really windy we're talking about, we're travelling in the wind. And storms as well. There's a benefit in all those things. For a lot of people, rain is just an inconvenience. But on the farm, or for me personally, when it rains, I love the rain because it feeds the land, it brings it back to life. It means I don't have to spend hours and hours watering my seeds and my plants. So I'm really grateful, and I do lots of shukr, I thank God for the rain. But at the same time, I was telling you, Alicia, I had to scrub my boots before I came out because the rain has made the farm so muddy, and that's a downside. There's no grass at the moment because it's cold and it's raining, so we're having to feed the animals hay, so it's more work. I love a cleansing thing, I always feel it washes everything away. So that's not just a physical thing, actually psychological. It makes you feel that you cleanse, it makes you feel things are washed and you can start again. And that has a very positive effect on our emotions. Actually, the sound of rain is very relaxing and calming, and a lot of us are quite anxious nowadays. So the sound and the sight, cleansing and calming is really important. It really helps. It helps even if you're inside looking at it, has a calming effect. Actually, the sensation of rain on your face can be really relaxing as well. Actually experiencing and feeling the rain cleansing you. And it's very stimulating, and it can change your mood from negative to positive. There's been research into rain, and it suggests that rainwater hitting the ground creates negative ions. I didn't know this until I looked it up. It's thought that negative ions boost our mood, relieve stress, and give us more energy. The air is cleaner after rainfall, as you mentioned. It literally washes away dirty particles, allergens and dust from the atmosphere. Unmistakably earthy smell after it rains, especially when there's been a long period of drying, is called petrichor. And petrichor includes chemicals. So when the earthy scent is released, it's found that this petrichor has a chemical geosmin, which is made of bacteria in the soil. And in the air, it actually has a calming effect on us. So these negative ions in the petrichor and the chemicals in soil actually affect physically the biological level. It affects our moods through the senses. I didn't know that until I just looked it up for the talk. So we know that it makes us feel calm, we know that we feel cleansed, we know that actually being in the rain is really nice, and it's so nice to have some science backing it up now. And, oh right, okay, that's fine. It just feels good sometimes to have that. There's another chemical boost that helps emotional well-being in mud. And it sort of makes me think, well, actually, not only 5-year-olds should have muddy play, we should all have muddy play. Something I noticed when I do a lot of digging and working in the vegetables, so a lot of soil on my fingers, pulling out the weeds, and most people hate weeding, but actually you find that some people love it because they've experienced something different from other people, because they've started weeding, they've found there's a benefit. It's not that the weeds sting you, because they do that, or you'll read the wrong thing. It's actually the soil. There's something in the soil. When we come into contact with soil, there's a bacterium in the soil called Mycobacterium vaccae. It's absorbed into our skin and it activates a small group of neurons containing serotonin. And the serotonin is the happy hormone. Amongst other things, serotonin regulates mood, very similar to antidepressants. So again, I looked it up and I found that out. But I knew something funny was going on. Whenever I was in the polytunnel, I made sure no one was around because I started to mess around with the soil, started to sing and giggle and talk with the plants. And I can admit that now because I know there's a science behind that. I don't feel like a weirdo. But at the time, I was reluctant to tell anyone that I enjoyed playing in the soil. And seriously, I did start to laugh completely alone in a polytunnel. And I did start to talk to the plants. Sometimes not very nicely because they would, have stinging nettles and I get stabbed by them. But a lot of the time I was actually communing with the plants, and I really thought I was really weird because I felt so alive, so connected. And I remember writing a poem about being buried in the soil, which sounds really morbid. And actually when I read it to my son, they were like, we're talking about death and being buried in the soil and trees growing on top of you. But at the time, it was such a cheerful, positive emotion that I was having. And I just thought it was so interesting afterwards that the whole concept of death as well, which I know is sad for the loss of the people you leave behind, but actually every single thing and every one of us is going to die. And messing around the soil gave me such a positive view of it. The whole concept of continuing of resurrection, as God talks about in the Quran. So emotionally, it actually made me feel quite positive about something that we consider really unpleasant and dark and depressing. So the other health benefits to farming and thinking about being sustainable is really important to us in the farm. I won't go on about the farm too much, but just generally thinking about moderation, not being wasteful. When you are growing your own vegetables, when you are looking after your animals, you have to think about what you're eating if you eat meat. You have to think about this animal that you've been rearing, actually taking its life and the responsibility that comes with that. It's much bigger when you're thinking about cows and big animals. It's still the same if you're thinking about chickens. And it's actually still the same when you're thinking about plants. You've got the fruit and it looks beautiful and peppers and whatever. Actually, I don't want to kill that plant and take the vegetable. Because part of me just loves the beauty and the fact that I've created this through God's creation. But another part of me is that this is food. So there is this balance. And often, you may leave some plants behind. You may collect the seeds, things like that, for it to grow again, this idea of resurrection. So once you get involved in taking all that time and effort in growing your own vegetables and your animals, you really do not waste. Nothing goes in the bin. Nothing is wasted. And we know from the Hadith, the Prophet, when an animal is killed, every part of it is used. So all the bones are used to make stock. The feet of the chickens are used. The legs of the chickens are used. Every part is used. And that's a form of respect as well for the animal, to not throw it away after taking its life. So it's a big, being a steward, it's a big ask. It's a big deal. We try to be sustainable in terms of energy as well on the farm. So we try not to overuse energy. We know there's an increasing problem with energy use in the world. We know that the developed world uses more energy than any other part of the world. And I don't need to go into any detail, you're all fully aware of that. So in terms of emotional satisfaction, it's really good to know that you're doing what you can. So we can do quite a bit in the farm because we have quite a bit of land, so we're able to grow trees, and then we use the wood for our heating. So we're creating our own energy, so it's sustainable. We're constantly growing trees, we're copsing trees, and then we're using the trees. So there's a cycle of sustainability, and that makes you feel really satisfied. We have good goals, and we're able to achieve them. So tree planting is continuous. Another good effect of doing something like that is the farm's a natural gym. So when you're working outside, you're doing physical work. Chopping a tree and carrying wood is really, really physically. It's like, you know, it's like weight training. And people who come to volunteer do end up having muscles. And often say, what often happens is the first week, you're like, oh my God, what have I done? Come to this farm, it is so physically tiring. But by the second, third week, people start to notice the body shape starts to change, start developing muscles. And that becomes addictive in that you start to feel happy about yourself. You're outdoor in the wind and the rain, experiencing the things we're talking about, and you're starting to look good, and you're starting to get strong. So there's a lot of connectedness, and that's quite a holistic way of looking after nature and environment, and looking after yourself. And again, when you're working outdoors, often, unlike other farms, we don't use a lot of petrol and so on. We use human physical labour. So there's loads of wheelbarrows, and you're pushing and carrying things around, and planting trees or weeding, and that is not something that you do all alone. Often there's other people doing it with you. So that in terms of social interaction, you create good friendships and good communities as well. Before I finish, I'm going to just mention something else. Waste. Waste is something that, again, is another problem about being sustainable. We're poisoning the earth in so many different ways. One of them is our waste, just landfills. So when you're working outdoors, when you're working where you're taking responsibility, you're minimising your waste. So for us, anything that's wasteful in terms of food is composted. So it becomes soil and it's used again, either just on the earth or in the vegetable garden. So we recycle as much as we can. All the manure from the animals is used in the vegetable garden, so there's a circular system going on there. And although we talk about landfills and that is poisoning the earth, there is another poison, if you like, that we're all sort of part of in creation, and we don't always have much power over changing. And that's just farming generally. In farming we have a real heavy use of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers, and these are all chemicals. And it's well known now that they're poisoning the land, and once you're using that, after a few years you can't grow anything on that land. We don't do any of that on the farm, and if you had gardens of your own or vegetable plots, I expect you wouldn't do that either. However, it is a real problem, and it does make you feel unhappy about what's happening in the environment. So one of the ways to help with your mental and physical health is actually getting out there and doing what you can. Shearing a vegetable patch, or converting your garden where it's probably got concrete, just getting rid of the concrete and bringing the soil back and growing things, and then you shear those things so you have a good social environment as well. So just before I finish, there's one other thing I'd like to read from the Quran, and that's in Surah Al-Rum, verse 41. Corruption has flourished on land and sea as a result of people's actions, and he will make them taste the consequences of some of their own actions, so they may turn back. I found that really interesting, because this was written such a long time ago, yet it's like it was written yesterday. It talked about corruption, the word is facade. Corruption on land and sea. For us, it's like, yeah, we're polluting our land, we're polluting our sea, we're killing the fish with chemicals. But there was also, it's not just land and sea and air, it's also our actions in terms of what's happening economically and politically. All our leaders seem to be corrupt. We've just got criminals voted in America. We've just got people who control everything. Well, we've got corrupt people, quite frankly, to put it bluntly, ruling all the countries on the planet now. So it's not just a land and sea and air, it's actually everything around us is so corrupt. And we're experiencing that one way or another. So our actions have consequences. And there's some things we can't change. We cannot stop our leaders doing what they're doing. We cannot turn around the clock. We cannot stop Trump being leader of America. And that's when it's really important to focus on yourself and your emotional state and your mental state, because that can lead to quite severe depression. You think you can't change things. And the most important thing for you isn't to change the world. It's just to change yourself. And we know that's called jihad. The greater jihad is just changing yourself. And that's all that you have to do. So our emotional well-being is actually of utmost importance, and not despairing, and keeping a real strong hold on our faith and on God. Being grateful for the gifts. Different people are given different gifts. And gratefulness is really important. The gifts mentioned in the Quran, all the gifts in the Quran, we should be grateful for those, because it will bring us joy, it will keep us going when things are getting tough. There are many people who do not believe in God. Increasingly, atheism is taking over, if you like. But still, being grateful is a really important part of that. People who do not believe in God are still grateful, because it brings a psychological benefit. So often you will find people having diaries or journals reminding themselves of the good things that happened in that day, literally taking count of all the good stuff. And that's really important, whether you believe in God or not. It's really important to do that, because it allows you to appreciate all the positive things you have. Because what we tend to do is focus on the negative. We allow negative things to take hold of our mind and knock out all the good things that happened in the day and amplify the negative. So actually being grateful to God, whether you're doing that in your prayers or just doing that in a journal, is a good reminder and psychologically really beneficial. I think that's one good thing, just to be really positive about what you can do and not focusing on what you can't do. Questions?
Yes, so many questions. Thank you so much for such a lovely and insightful talk. I really enjoyed it. And I had lots of laughs in between, so I think other people did. Does anyone have questions?
When you mentioned how your main source of you burn wood from the trees that you grow, it reminded me because my mum also has a wood stove, and she usually uses it in the winter because of energy prices and all of that. And it reminds me because my parents, when they were growing up there back in Turkey, their houses didn't have central heating, so you would have a wood oven in maybe the living room, and maybe in the winter everyone would sleep in there. And when I was younger, like my dad decided we're gonna raise chickens in our garden, and we had all of these like roosters. We had multiple roosters who would always crow really early in the morning, and I kept thinking the neighbours are gonna report us to the council, and they never did. And one day a neighbour came up to us and was like, they had grown up in like the countryside, and they said to us, whenever I hear the rooster, it reminds me of my childhood. And it was like my dad from rural Turkey and this man from like Yorkshire,
Yes.
and this kind of shared experience they had as children, and my dad wanting to recreate that for like him, like for his children in the future, and a way for him to feel connected with the country he grew up in. It was just like, you're right, there's so many ways in which we are connected to people
Yeah.
and ourselves and our cultures and our history.
Yeah, definitely. And it's lovely how you then take care of each other and seeing the needs of the Yorkshireman, and he was able to help with that and connect. Yeah, that's lovely. Any other questions? Should we take this?
Thank you for the really insightful talk. I wanted to ask if you grew up around animals or handling animals at all.
No,
and
I
if
grew
not,
up in
then-
London.
Okay.
In a house where we had a cat.
Okay. So how was it? Did it take a while to get used to handling animals, and do you slaughter animals in the farm as well? And like, if so, like, how was that? Getting used to that?
Yeah, it took a while to come to the conclusion of starting a farm. A lot of focusing on what the Quran. I didn't read it. There's so much I could have quoted from the Quran on this subject. I would have read half the Quran actually. But the whole concept of halal comes into it, because people wonder what halal is or what it means. And in the Quran it says, they ask you what is halal, tell them that which is tayyib. And tayyib just means healthy and wholesome. So we often talk about our work, our income being halal, a halal income, a halal economics, halal politics, because the word just actually means healthy and wholesome, going back to this idea of balance. So it's healthy and wholesome. And we often just use it for meat. So understanding it in the way that Quran mentions it in a much more wider concept, understanding in terms of stewardship, led us to eventually have the farm. So I didn't go from sort of London cat garden to boom, 100 sheep and goats. It did take a long time. So, I've forgotten the question.
How was it getting used to handling animals?
You
Particularly
never
milking
quite
animals.
get used to it. If you are quite excited about learning new things, which I hope all of you are, which is a very natural place to be, I just want to learn everything. Everything around creation is so interesting, exciting. So I had no experience, neither myself or my husband are farmers. He had a dog actually, and I had a cat. But we had to learn how to grow vegetables. We're still learning. We had to learn how to look after chickens, sheep. Now I have goats. I got really excited about learning to milk goats. Really frustrating because it's easy once you can do it, of course. But it's a technique, and it's very difficult at first. And I just thought, I give up. I'm not going to learn this. And now I can milk. I milked a goat this morning before I came.
Okay.
So that sense, having goals is really important. Psychologically, emotionally, well-being. You have to have goals, but some have to be quite small, so you can achieve them. So you get that serotonin, you get that dopamine kick all the time you achieve a goal. So I just feel wonderful that I can milk a goat now. And my next one is training the goat to pull a cart, which can take years, but it's just getting used to animals, just connecting with them, and having to make those really difficult decisions. So I have 2 male goats. Who needs loads of male goats? You don't need male goats. You only need one, don't you? You need 1 male. So I don't need these 2 male goats. And from a sustainable point of view, I don't need loads and loads of goats because I'm not going to farm them like I have been sheep. These are my pets. Yet I have to make a really difficult decision about these 2 male goats. And I've told the goats, they either start pulling carts this summer and be useful goats, because then it reduces me having to use a vehicle using petrol energy. So I use the natural goats, the will naturally pull carts, and I can take these heavy feed bags and logs around the farm with the goats. So the goats have something to do because they want to walk around and run all the time. You just focus something that they naturally do into something positive and the balance that can work for everyone. So that's the goal. That's their goal too, because if they don't, then it's going to be a roast goat. And that's really tough because they're called yin and yang, my two goats, and I really love them. And they cause them to be muddy all the time, they jump on me. But I'm going to have to make that decision. I've already been thinking about it. Thinking, guys, come on, you've got to get training. Because otherwise I have to make that difficult decision. I mean, I may sell them to someone who wants a goat pet, but it is really difficult, and it brings us to the whole concept of eating meat. If you had to take responsibility for the meat you ate, you would eat very little meat. And we know the Prophet ﷺ only ate meat once a month. You know, and one of the problems we have in our society now is overeating meat, not just a problem for our physical health, but a problem for the animals, because it's going totally against our deen, it's going against stewardship, it's going against the criterion, because there is no care of the animals. If we're eating the amount of meat we're eating, we are definitely abusing the animals. Don't kid yourselves about that. Every chicken you eat is an abused chicken. That's a fact. Unless you've grown it in your own back garden, your cockles.
Yeah. Because you have multiple reasons and they're not useful.
Yeah. And for people who say that's cruel, it's just ridiculous. Except they should stop eating meat. And then you stop eating meat, become vegetarian. And there's still cruelty in that. Not because, oh, it hurts a plant, although some would argue that, but because almost all the veg that's grown is grown with chemicals and pesticides. So at one level you're killing the natural flora and insects and so on, which we need for the balance. Allah didn't create bees or insects and ants for nothing. We may not like them. I don't like being stung by wasps. It's very painful. But they have a place in the earth, a very important place. So all the industrial farming is really harmful at so many different levels. I'm not going to give a lecture on that, because I think that's information you all know, you can always research.
Thank you very much for all these beautiful insights, and I also very much enjoyed listening to your quite calming voice. So that's just a small footnote.
But you sleep.
No, it was calming. But I was wondering, since I mean, we obviously live in a postmodern era where the vast majority of humanity is almost like doomed to remain disconnected with nature, to remain in an environment which is rather to be described as foreign to the initial state as a species. And I was wondering, what could people do whose reality is shaped by things like Zoom meetings, artificial light, screens and stuff like that, which has become, unfortunately, the new prototype of a way of living. What could these sort of people do to reconnect to what used to be their natural environment?
Yeah, that's really tough, because that is the way a lot of people are going. No one wants to start a farm. There's no money in it. It's really hard work, and you're always muddy. So it is difficult. We all aspire to these corporate jobs, to have money, to be able to buy a house, you know, to be able to do those things that we feel we have to do. It's really thinking out the box. It's saying, actually, do we really need those things? It's connecting with your true self and thinking, why am I really doing this? What's really important about this? It may be that you do have to do that. It may be you've looked at all the options and you have to do it. You can have a goal, but we didn't start. My husband turned 40 when we started. He'd done, you know, the degree and the PhD and the lecturing, and he was in geography, so I suppose he's much more connected to the environment, teaching geography. But he just decided that that's not what he wants. You know, we have to do some of that stuff because we have no choices. But where you do have choices, you can make good choices. So it was a big change for us. It's quite drastic, and I usually advise people not to make such a change. So if you do have a job where you've got Zoom meetings and things, I would keep that, because you need income. But wherever you get an opportunity to buy land or have vegetable patch to connect, to put the balance back for yourself, or to share with families, or to share with communities where you can still connect with the physical world. Because the stewardship is not just about the physical world, it is about the social world as well. It is about interacting with each other, not being isolated in the office, not just seeing your friends on a screen, not using social media. You know, that's not reality. And increasingly we know that people that are ruling social media now are just going to feed us absolute propaganda. I remember doing A-level sociology a very long time ago indeed, and at that time my sociology teacher said that news was fiction. My dad used to watch the news every day at 9 o'clock, he thought it's fact. And increasingly we know that's true, it was fiction then, and there's even more now. So we're just fed a whole load of propaganda and lies, and the best way to cleanse that is just turn the phone off. Just turn it off. Don't read any of it. Are you going to be ignorant, really? Is true knowledge out there? Isn't it in the fitzbah? So, yeah, so I think sometimes you do have to do those things and you have no choices, but where you have choices, where you can, as I say, start a college garden, you know, a student vegetable patch, whatever, sharing things, saying like your turn to dig, you're manuring the soil, you know, and you're going to do all the harvesting, and then you get all this food, and you think, I can't eat all the aubergines in one day, and we've only got a week, so then you can be really creative. How are we going to preserve it? How did they do it before? We're making jams, you know, all our apples got pressed and made into apple juice. So we have our own apple juice and our own jams now. You know, so there's loads of things, and the psychological health, the emotional benefit of eating your own produce, it's incomparable to buy something from Sainsbury's. And again, you won't throw it away. I've just taken 6 months to grow that. It's taken me, you know, hours to preserve it, to, you know, jar it. There's no way you're going to throw that in the dustbin. If it gets a bit of mould, just throw the mould away and you eat it. But if you bought something from the supermarket, you've got a bit of mould, oh my God, I'm going to die, just chuck it away. So your whole way of thinking, it's like turning around your brain. Did you have a question?
That was pretty similar to my question, but another question I had was about your farm, and like, to what extent is it completely sustainable? Do you find you need to go to the supermarket to get groceries and things? Or
Yeah, I
do you
do.
feel
Yeah, yeah, you have to go and get basics. We still have to go to the supermarket to get stuff, but increasingly we're becoming, self-sufficient is a big word, we're not becoming complete self-sufficient, we never will, but we've got loads of solar panels. So we're creating like 20 kilowatts, I think, of electricity. And I talk about goals, so again, emotional health. So the goal, there's always a goal, there's big goals and little goals. So one of the goals is to get an array of batteries so we can be independent with